Okay, Alan, thanks for making the time today. I've been watching a couple of your YouTube videos about Cambodia. One of the things that drew me to the content is I've seen an awful lot of stuff on the Philippines, on Vietnam, on Thailand, but there's not an awful lot of content at the moment on Cambodia. So I'm curious about your story, Alan, your backstory, and what drew you to Cambodia as a destination.
Yeah, so to give you the short version, a little over a year ago at age 31, I quit my job in America and just sort of decided to give life in Cambodia a shot. I just wanted to live somewhere with a low cost of living and a place that would be a refreshing change from Western culture.
Yeah.
And I'd never actually been here before, so I kind of just booked a one-way ticket and hoped for the best. But yeah,
Brave.
but the good news is that everything has been going great so far. So in that sense, I think I've kind of been lucky.
Yep.
Just to be clear, I don't have any job currently, and my plan is that unless we get the Great Depression 2.0,
Yep.
my investments will provide more than enough to pay for my lifestyle in Cambodia. And I can elaborate on that if you'd like.
That's phenomenal. At the age of 31,
Mhm.
that's truly impressive. I definitely want to dive into that. Before we go into the financial circumstance and how you managed to get to fire so quickly, before you
Mhm.
landed in Cambodia, did you research any other countries, or did you just have your heart set on like Cambodia?
Yeah, so my first decision point, I guess, when I decided I wanted to move abroad is I'm like, okay, the sort of two low cost regions that people tend to go to are either Latin America or
Yep.
Southeast Asia.
Hmm.
And I lean more towards Southeast Asia, I think mainly because I really like Asian food, like Thai food is my favorite cuisine.
Yep.
There are some other factors as well. And then it was kind of between like either, like you said, like Thailand, Philippines, or Cambodia. And I picked Cambodia mostly just because of the three, it seems like it had slightly lower cost of living.
Yep.
And then there's some minor things that were bonuses, like the fact that they use the US dollar as currency there, which is
Okay.
convenient for me. But that was my thought process there.
Awesome. Had you been to anywhere else in Southeast Asia?
No, it's funny, like, before I came here, I hadn't even done international travel for quite a while.
Yeah.
I went to, um, Italy and Mexico, but that was when I was, like, in high school.
Yeah.
Um, so, yeah, I mean, the reason for that is to sort of go back to your question, in America, I was a defense contractor, which is how
Yep.
made so much money. But then also, like, while you're doing that, you have to jump through a lot of hoops to travel internationally because they're like, hey, you're like a valuable asset. We don't want you to get kidnapped by the Chinese or something.
Yep.
So, like, just because of that, I hadn't really done any international travel.
Gotcha. Okay. So now that you've landed in Cambodia, you don't have a full-time job, you're living off your investment income. Describe your lifestyle for me. Like what does Alan in Cambodia look like?
Yeah, so I mean, as far as like how good the standard of living and the lifestyle is, it depends on how you look at it. Like the good thing is that nearly everything that you could want is just way cheaper than it is in the West.
Yep.
So your dollar just goes a lot farther. But then obviously like there's some downsides of living in a less developed country too. The healthcare here is, I mean, it's cheap, but it's also just very poor quality.
Yep.
Cars are also really expensive because they're taxed a lot and they have to be imported. So like I don't own a car here. But the way I look at it is like if you want to just live a simple life, like without a lot of luxuries, Cambodia is a great place to do that. Like,
Yep.
yeah, you can't have like Amazon.com, deliver whatever it is your heart desires in 24 hours, but there's more to life than things like that.
Awesome. So it sounds like you're living reasonably like a local and more simply. You're not like balling it out.
Yeah, as you might guess, I was very frugal while I was
Mm.
living in America. Like at one point, I had a boss who literally drove a Lamborghini to work. I
Yep.
was nothing like that. But what I like to tell people is that being frugal pays off twice. And the first payoff is the obvious one that, oh, well, you save money. And then the second way that it pays off is that you sort of get used to living a simpler life and you're less materialistic and it's
Yep.
easier to be happy. So that's
Yeah.
like the second one.
I totally agree with you. Have you come across that Netflix documentary Minimalism?
I don't watch a lot of Netflix, so
Oh,
I
you
so I
don't?
haven't
Okay.
seen that, but it sounds interesting, and yeah, I would consider myself a minimalist.
Gotcha. To be honest, I don't think you need it. You're living the life already.
Mhm.
They have made the video available on YouTube. I might send you the link afterwards. I think you'd like it. It was about two advertising execs in America, and they were making like six-figure incomes, and they were struggling to figure out why they weren't happy. And
Uh-huh.
there was this one time, one of them, they met at a bar, and his friend was really pissed off. It's like, why are you so happy now? And he said he'd come across this thing called minimalism. So basically, letting go of, buying physical things, needing physical things, buying things to impress other people, and that was their journey. It sounds like you're on that path as well.
Yeah.
Can you share with me some of the your living expenses? So what does a month look like, and what are the examples of costs in US dollars of basic things like eating out, electricity, and rent? What does
Mhm.
Cambodia look like?
Yeah, so I actually did a whole video about this on my own channel, which I'm sure you'll have a link to.
Yep, I'll post
But just
that.
to sum it up, I pay about $250 for rent, about another $100 in utilities. In my case, zero for transportation because I just
You
ride my
walk.
bicycle
Yeah.
everywhere. Well, I have a bicycle, so it's like a one-time cost, right?
Yep.
You pay for the bicycle up front, but then there's no like fuel cost. And
Yep.
I mean, I guess it won't last forever and I'll have to get a new one, but close to zero. And then I spend about another 300 or so on food, which includes eating out as well as helping my wife pay for some of the groceries.
Yep.
And yeah, I mean
What's a meal out
that
cost for
the
two people?
well, it depends on like where you want to go. I mean, a lot of things I've noticed. I mean, this is true in Cambodia, but like also in the West, like things can cost about as little or as much as you want them to cost.
Yep.
So can you find like $100 steak in Cambodia? Like, yeah, you absolutely can.
You
Can
can?
you find, yeah, can you find $1 street food in Cambodia? You can. So,
Yeah.
I'd say, if you're like somewhere in the middle, you're probably looking at about like $5 a meal, if you're not trying to really ball hard and live it up.
Yep.
But you could definitely like spend less than that if you want. Like even on my rent, like it's 250 a month for a two-bedroom apartment.
Yep.
You could end up spending, 100 a month on like a one bedroom if you know how to shop around. So
Gotcha. And the 250 a month for the two-bedroom, does it have like facilities? Is there a pool, gym? Is there anything else, or is it mainly just the apartment?
In my case, there's not, but they definitely do have some apartments with that. And also
Okay.
the nice thing, this is definitely different from America. Everything is all the apartments are furnished here. So like
Okay. Cool.
again, I don't know what it's like in Australia, but like in America, you rent an apartment,
It's
like
empty.
there's nothing in it, right?
Yeah.
You've got to bring your own furniture, bring your own bed, all that stuff. Here, never like that. You get your own bed,
Mm.
furniture, pillows, TV, all that stuff is already there.
Yep. And how would you describe your standard of life now in Cambodia versus your standard of life back in America?
Yeah, so I mean, I talked about it before. I mean, I'd say it's like kind of similar, like I wasn't
Okay.
really spending a lot of money in America, and I'm not really spending a lot of money here.
Yep.
In America, I was making more, but then like you also have to like, spend more for my mortgage and such.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, it's pretty similar. Like, there's a reason that plenty of expats come here and are happy. It's not really drastically different.
Gotcha. Now, I have to confess, I've never been to Cambodia. It's on my list of places to travel. So
Mhm.
the Philippines and Cambodia are the next countries on my list. Um, my perception of Cambodia from the videos I've seen is probably 10 to 15 years behind Vietnam in terms of development. So there are still some dirt streets, and I haven't seen too many of like the luxury high-rise condos. But from your experience, how have you found the level of development in Cambodia?
Um, so if you live in Phnom Penh, the capital, that's definitely the most developed area. You can think of it as being like the Bangkok or even the New York City of Cambodia.
Yep.
Some people might like that kind of modern, faster paced lifestyle. I don't, and I find that even most people that I do know that live in Phnom Penh, it's not because it's like their first choice of where to live. It's just
Yep.
because that's where like all the good jobs are if
Yeah.
you do want to work. Um, where I live, which is Siam Reap,
Yep.
it's definitely not like, living out in a tent in the woods, but it's not like living in New York City either, right? It's somewhere in between. So I kind of like it because like to me it has that good balance of like it's quiet and laid back,
Mm,
but there's also like plenty of stuff to do.
okay. I think I'm like you. I kind of like the tier two cities. It gets you
Yeah.
away from the crazy hustle and bustle, and everyone rushing to get to their work. Um, so, for example, in Malaysia, I kind of prefer like maybe Penang over Kuala Lumpur, and in Vietnam, I
Uh-huh.
kind of prefer Hanoi or Hoi An over something like Ho Chi Minh City, because some of the main cities just crazy busy. Um, you mentioned before that you basically don't have any work now, so you're in a very enviable position. I
Mhm.
haven't met many people who fired at 31. I've met people who fired a little bit later. That's phenomenal. How did you do it?
Um, so yeah, there's a lot to say on that. I mean, to put it like simply, like you could actually think of like your own personal finances as being like a business. So like if you're evaluating, the financial strength of a company, you're probably going to look at three things, right? Which is the company's revenue, the company's costs, and then, assuming they're making a profit, like how do they take that positive net income and then reinvest it, right?
Hmm.
So if your own personal life, it's the same, right? Your revenue is, well, that's what you get from your job. Your costs are, well, your costs. And then, just the same way that a company takes its profits and, reinvests it and lets it compound, you can obviously take your savings and invest that and let it compound.
Yep.
So as some people, you can read all these blogs about, oh, here's how to save, $20 a week by doing such and such. I did that. Then, you hear some people that really talk about, oh, here's how to get a high paying job. I did that too.
Hmm.
And then, of course, there's plenty of literature on how to invest your money so that it grows. And I did pretty well in that as well. So, on all three fronts, I was saving something like, 70% of my
Crikey.
income.
Okay.
I was making like, $180,000 a year. So, I was still pretty able to live pretty well on 30% of that.
Mm,
And, I just, I mostly just invested in, boring stocks. They didn't necessarily do a lot better or worse than the market, but, over the last 5 years or so, the market's done quite well.
yeah. And it sounds like you picked your own stocks as opposed to going down the index route.
Yeah, so, I did, for most people, I would actually recommend going the index route, and in fact, I've recently tried to get my wife, my Cambodian wife into investing, and I just said like, "Hey, here's some cheap Vanguard funds.
Yep.
These are diversified. Stick your money here.
Yep.
Let it grow over time." Um, a lot of like what investing success comes down to, I think, is just the psychology of it
Hmm.
in the sense that, it's pretty well documented that people tend to buy at the top of the market and sell at the bottom.
Yeah.
So if you could just avoid that, you're going to be doing pretty well. And for me personally, I find it psychologically either easier to stay invested in companies that I know well
Yep.
and, believe in, rather than, if I'm invested in like the S&P 500, let's say,
Yep.
is the S&P 500 overvalued or undervalued right now? Should you buy or should you sell? Like I have no idea, right? Because it's a very abstract concept. It's
Yep.
500 different companies where, if you ask me, is MasterCard, is that a company that's like going to do well over the future?
Mm.
I can say pretty confidently, like, yeah, they have done well. They will continue to do well. I'm not going to sell anytime soon. Not that that's financial advice to buy any particular companies. So that's,
Yeah.
the primary reason that I do that I pick my own stocks.
And did you have any preferences in particular segments? Do you like favorite technology, consumables, energy, anything in particular?
So it's funny actually. My work was in tech. Like I said, I was a defense contractor, but that was basically all writing code. So,
Yep.
I remember, I was working during, 2020 during COVID,
Hmm.
and all my coworkers, they're all tech guys, and they were like 100% invested in tech stocks
Yeah.
or close to it. And I was kind of like the lone guy who was like pretty skeptical.
Yep.
And, for a while, I kind of look silly because in 2020, tech stocks did extremely well and
Yep.
like they're all getting rich. And that guy that I said drove a Lamborghini to work, that's how he bought that. He just, invested in all these really hyped up tech stocks. Whereas I'm actually underweight tech stocks. And part of the reason for that is due to my experience in the tech industry. I
Yep.
have the belief that a lot of those companies are, kind of all hype, little substance.
Yep.
So, not to shit on anyone's investment strategies, but I never invested in companies like, I don't know, yeah,
The
basically
fangs.
anything that's in Kathy Wood's portfolio, right?
Gotcha.
So yeah, I find tech to be a little hit or miss. Um And all of the companies that I invest in, like the one rule I have is that the company has to be making a profit. So yes, like I understand, like, okay, if you'd invested in Amazon in say the year 2000, you would be extremely rich. But for every Amazon out there, there's a
Gotcha.
thousand other companies that people said were going to, even now you read, oh, this company's going to be the next Amazon. This company's going to be the next Apple. Like,
Yep.
yeah, some of them will be, but we all know that they can't all be, right?
Yeah.
If there's 100 companies that people say are going to be the next Amazon, at least 99 of them aren't. So I find it very hard to sort of do that almost venture capital style investing where you're trying to like pick the next tech company that's going to change the world. I mean, if you or other people can do it, great, but it's not what I'm comfortable doing.
Gotcha. So it sounds like you have a preference for dividend investing. Is that right?
Um, Not really. I mean, don't get me wrong, a lot of the stocks that I own do pay dividends, and my dividend income is larger than my expenses.
Yep.
But to me, that's like more of a nice bonus rather than like something that I'm actively looking for. I look for companies. Really, just what I found is that what value investing is, regardless of who you ask, they're kind of two main factors, like the price that you're paying for the company, whether you're looking at price to earnings ratio or, EV to EBITDA. There's like the price component, and then there's the sort of like profitability component. So, like, ideally, I want to invest in a company that makes very large profit margins and returns on capital, and that is trading at a reasonable valuation,
Gotcha.
both in comparison to the company's history.
Hmm.
Because with these screeners, you can see like, oh, this company trades at, a price to earnings ratio of, 12, but like in the past, it's traded a lot closer to a price to earnings ratio of 20.
Gotcha.
So you might say like, oh, it's undervalued compared to history.
Yep.
But then I also, prefer something that's also low, like on an absolute basis, right? Like if a company is trading at a price to earnings ratio of 30, whereas in the past it's traded at a price to earnings ratio of 50, I'm not going to go, well, oh, 30 is a lot less than 50. So like,
Yeah.
I'm going to buy. And, there's other things that I look for as well. Like all things equal, I prefer to invest in a company that has low debt. Just, Peter Lynch once say, he said it's very difficult for a company with no debt to go bankrupt, which,
Yeah.
is obvious, of course, but it's definitely something that helps because especially, we don't know what interest rates are going to be in the future. So, some of these companies, and actually, I hate to give you a super long answer, but like you mentioned dividend investing, right? A example of a company that a lot of people invested in for the dividend was like AT&T. And my mom's been working for AT&T for 30 years, also as a software developer.
Yep.
So, I met some of her friends, some of which were like pretty high up in the company, and they would always cite like, "Oh yeah, I'm compensated in AT&T stock, but like I don't sell it because of the dividend." And I would
Yeah.
say to them like, "Well, you sure that dividend is sustainable? Like AT&T has a lot of debt, and it doesn't seem like that debt that they've taken on is really yielding much of a return, right? If you say borrow money at 5% interest, but your company's return on capital is 5%, well, then that debt isn't really helping you at all."
Mm.
And of course, if you look at AT&T's dividend history, they've already, cut their dividend and the total returns of the stock have been really poor. My mom always says like, oh, the company's stock, the stock price is half of like what it was when I joined the company.
Yep.
It's like the dividend didn't really compensate her for that. So yeah, I try to avoid yield traps, and I know that like a lot of newer investors just see like, oh, the dividend is like, 8%. That means I'm just getting like a guaranteed 8% a year, but it's not really
It's not
that simple.
guaranteed.
So yeah, yeah. And one of the other YouTubers that I like that I would highly recommend to anyone who's interested in finance. I don't know if you've heard of Ben Felix, but
Ben, no.
um yeah, he's a portfolio manager, and all of his stuff, it comes from people sort of have different biases, and his is he comes from a very sort of academic view. He goes into like, well, if you think this strategy outperforms, here's what the research shows.
Hmm.
And like a few of the videos that he's made recently are on the fallacies of dividend investing. So I would actually recommend like checking his channel out. It's very well researched.
Will do. That sounds like a good one. So it sounds like you're more of a value investor than a dividend investor, but you happen to be able to live comfortably off the dividends that you do earn.
Yes, that's correct.
So does that mean you're still in the accumulation phase? So the excess dividends that you're getting that you're not spending, you're actually still accumulating and buying more shares?
Right. So, I'm 33 today,
Yeah.
so I'm, planning for the fact that I'm going to live another 60 years.
Yes.
So the idea is that, well, I need my wealth to last me another 60 years, which is, we'll see how it goes, I guess.
Yep.
But yeah, the idea is that my expenses each month are about 1,000 a month, right? So if my portfolio grows significantly more than 12,000 a year, before you factor in my spending, well, that just means that, on average, every year my portfolio is going to be larger than it was the previous year. And that will, account for inflation. And
Yeah.
in general, I just like to err on the side of caution, right? Like you could try to run some simulations and go like, well, if I, spend, this is the maximum I can spend that would give me a, 95% chance of not outliving my portfolio, right? And I'm sure there's plenty of sites that you can find that will do those calculations, but it's like, okay, well, what about the other 5% where, I do outlive my portfolio, right? And, I end up with nothing. Like, if something happened and say, for example, the Great Depression 2.0 did start tomorrow, like I could definitely recover from that.
Hmm.
But of course, if you like just run out of money at like age 80, it's like, okay, well, what do you do then? Right.
Yeah.
Um,
I think you got a lot of margin for error. I mean, one, you're 33 years
yeah, yeah.
old. to at any particular point in time you can go back to doing some contracting just to build back your capital base. I mean, you've got lots of margin of error. Um,
Yeah, and also I guess it is worth mentioning that I do make like a little bit of money off YouTube, and then I hope that like that can sort of I don't expect for YouTube alone to ever pay for all my expenses, but even
mhm,
if it pays for say 25% of my expenses, well,
yep,
that obviously gives me more room for error too.
yeah, gotcha. And knowing what you know now, having lived there for 2 or so years, is there anything you do differently?
Um, so I mean that's a difficult question to answer, and I'm sure you could find a few science fiction movies that cover the pitfalls of going back and changing your past decisions.
Yeah.
Uh, so I mean, I'll just say that I always did better in school than most people, but I kind of wish that I had educated myself more in other ways. So, in the sense that, I learned a lot about investing over the past few years, and I'm still learning, of course, but, I would have a lot more money today if I
Mm,
had learned all that stuff 10 or 15 years ago.
yeah. That applies to everyone. That applies to all of us.
Yeah.
It's a travesty that we don't teach financial literacy in high school. Not properly anyway.
Yeah, I
Okay.
mean, yeah, they do to a very minor extent. And, anyone who's studied math, my degrees are in math, by the way. So, I knew about what compound interest was
Yep.
from a pretty young age, but it like took me a while to sort of like connect that to the
Yeah.
real world rather than it just being some equation that I learned in
Abstract.
math
Yeah.
class.
And so I kind of joke that unless you're born into an Asian family or a Jewish family, you're actually not taught financial literacy in the household. And so my son's got his very first job. He's 21 years old, and I'm telling him, okay, so say 51% of your income or 50% of your income, put it into an account that you can't touch. And then every couple of months, once it accumulates to a certain portion, we're going to like sweep that away and we're going to put that into an index fund and you just don't see it. Everything else you got left, spend it. Like, don't even think about it. Enjoy the money because you've already done the hard work. The hard work is the 50% that's already invested.
Hmm.
So it's kind of like that conversation. That's almost like the street smart, pragmatic version of, well, this is how compounding is going to work, and let me show you the mathematics of what that's going to be worth in 81 years old.
Hmm.
It almost doesn't matter if you've got a 50% savings rate. 90% of the problems sort itself out over time. Can you tell me about the visa situation in Cambodia? What kind of visa are you there on? And
Yeah, so actually I think that might be my next video that I do on my channel,
awesome,
but um basically you could just stay as long as you want. Like you
really?
just pay your visa fees or whatever, and the government is happy to have them, happy to have you all here.
Gotcha.
And it's I've known some people that have like stayed in Thailand, and I know it's a bit easier than somewhere like that. You don't have to do like any border runs or anything like that. You just like go to a visa agent, say like, look, I want to stay for X period of time. They know how to work the system, so you just pay them the fee. You'll get your whatever visa it is you want. You'll get it in a month or less.
Oh, okay. And so and you don't have to, how frequently do you have to extend your visa?
Yeah, so me now, I just have like a 1 year visa.
Wow,
It's actually a working visa, even though I
you're not
don't
working.
work. Well, the reason that I have to do that is it's the only long-term visa that's available for someone who doesn't qualify for like the retirement visa, because you have
Yep.
to be, I think, 55 to get that. So I actually pay like 200 a year for a work permit that I don't use, but like it's fine. They just put, oh, he's self-employed, and if anyone comes asking, I just go, well, I have a YouTube
I've
channel.
used
There's
YouTube
my
channel. Yeah,
self-employment. Yeah,
that's
so
right.
yeah, it's pretty nice.
Wow, that's incredible. Now, I think I saw another one of the videos that you did where if you hadn't
Hmm.
chosen Cambodia, you would have looked at a different spot.
Yeah, I just made that to talk about some countries that I thought maybe other people like hadn't considered. So the three countries that I talked about in that video were Ecuador, Mauritius, and the Philippines.
Yep.
And I think they all have different pros and cons. Like, you're never gonna find a country to stay in that's just absolutely perfect.
Yeah.
It's in a way, I think it's kind of like, finding, like, a life partner where, like, you're just never gonna meet someone who's just absolutely perfect because
Yep.
perfect people don't exist. You just try to stay with the person whose flaws you can accept, right? And who makes you happy in,
Yep.
other ways. It's same thing with a country, like America isn't perfect, Cambodia isn't perfect. None of these countries are perfect, but you know, I think what most people should do if they can is, figure out like what's important to you and then, ideally relocate yourself somewhere where you can get what it is that you want.
Gotcha. And of the three that you researched, do you have any plans to go visit them?
Um, so yeah, I mean, I would like to visit them all. I mean, there's a lot of countries that I'd like to visit,
Mm.
even just for fun. And my family was kind of debating like where we're gonna go for our vacation next year. Originally, we were thinking Ecuador, but instead, I think we've decided to visit Japan. Part of the issue there is that like Siam Reap like just built a new airport and it
Yep.
doesn't really have like a lot of routes yet. So to like go anywhere like too far, you have to get like all these different flights and
Yeah.
I don't want to be spending like 24 hours consecutively on planes right now
Yep.
because then it's like by the time you get there, you need like a couple of days to recover from the jet lag, and then like before you know it, like all your time is gone. So,
Yep.
yeah, there are a lot of countries that I would like to visit, and when I do go to any of these places, it's not going to be just to like go to the tourist attractions, but also to
Yeah.
kind of do some research. Like, hey, here's what the culture is like. Here's what the cost of living's like. Maybe you'd enjoy living here, that sort of thing.
That sounds great. One of the things my wife and I are fond of doing is we've been using our vacations to scout out potential geo-arbitrage countries around the world.
Hmm.
And sometimes you hit something where you go, not sure if I would live here. It's a great place to visit. So recently we came back
Hmm.
from Egypt. Very low cost of living. Cost of living is probably about 20% of what it is here in Australia, but it's still very underdeveloped. And then you go to places like Kuala Lumpur, that's a third of the cost of it is here in Australia, but it's like a modern city. It's a tier one city, great
Hmm.
infrastructure, great healthcare, great everything, really. Wonderful food. Um, and like you, I think I like to spend like a decent amount of time in a place so you don't feel like a tourist. You feel like you can get to know the locals, meet some friends, and um, yeah. I think one of the funny things that I laughed at when you were talking about you don't want to spend 24 hours on a plane. We're from Australia, so it's 24 hours to get to, pretty much anywhere that we want to go because we're so
Yeah.
far away from everything. Yeah, so we're kind of used to it. The downside is, well, the good thing for you is you might have jet lag, but you don't have a job to worry about, and you don't have like a
Mhm.
compressed vacation period that you have to squeeze the travel in, so you can stay a little bit longer.
Yeah, although, my wife though, she does work. She's
Good point.
actually, she's
Yes.
actually an English teacher, and so, yeah, we do try to, like, plan the vacation during some time where, like, there's either, like, a holiday here or something, so she might get some time off from work just because it's a holiday, and then maybe she takes, like, a few more days off to add on to that.
Sorry, did you say
Um
wife?
Yeah, I mean, it's it's kind of yeah, she's sort of both my fiance and my wife, which
Uh,
might not make a lot of sense,
yep.
but there's sort of two components to getting married. There's like the sort of traditional, like religious part of it, and then there's the legal marriage part. So
Yep.
we've done the ceremonial part already. So in
Oh
the
wow.
eyes of in the eyes of like people who live in Cambodia, she is my wife, but we haven't gotten legally married yet, and we're gonna go outside of the country to do that because there are some sort there are various roadblocks to getting legally married inside Cambodia. So
Oh wow.
yeah, the plan is that we're gonna go to America to get married. She'll get to experience that world for a few weeks, and then we're gonna come back here.
Congratulations, man. Well done.
Thanks.
Yeah. I didn't realize that. I'd seen a couple of your videos. I knew that you'd found a long-term
Yeah,
girlfriend.
yeah, and I'm gonna like make a video on that as well because in some videos I've referred to her as my wife, and others I've referred to her as my fiance. So I know it's confusing,
Yep.
because again, we're not married legally, but anytime I'm meeting someone in Cambodia, like I introduce her as my
Yep.
wife, but we're essentially going to have a hopefully a second wedding in America, like a Western style wedding. Not a big one, but one nonetheless.
Nice. How did you find dating in Cambodia? What was that like?
So I mean, and again, I made a video about this too. I mean, I did not have very much luck with dating in America, which who knows why that is. Maybe it's my fault, maybe it's their fault, but I'm more of like an introverted person, and I'm not good at like sort of starting conversations with people, getting my foot in the door. But I find that like just when you're in a foreign country, even if say like I was in Australia,
Mm,
just the fact that like you're a foreigner, that already is kind of like an icebreaker,
yeah.
right? Because here when I run
Where are
into
you
someone, like
from?
first question, right, just kind of like in college where you had the icebreaker of like, so what's your major? Like it's
Yeah.
it's kind of like that, except the icebreaker is, yeah, so where are you from? Why are you here? Tell me about all that. So the people here are really friendly, and people here, they definitely want to, meet life partner, get married, that sort of thing. And just the same way that like in America we often find foreigners more attractive, even if there's like a British person, like, oh, they got a
Ah,
British
yes.
accent, how sexy,
Exotic.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So like kind of the same thing here. Like just the fact that you're a foreigner, like kind of takes you up a peg on the dating ladder. So I found it pretty nice. I just use Tinder to get dates, and I know in America, like Tinder has like the reputation of being like kind of like a hookup app.
Hook
Like
up.
people don't
Yeah.
really take it seriously. Here it's not really like that. Like people just kind of see it as like a legitimate way to meet new people,
Yep.
and because it's a Western app, most people that use Tinder can speak English to some extent. So then you like kind
Ah,
of filter out like all the people who don't know any English at all. Like most people in the cities in Cambodia, they all speak English, but it's not necessarily everyone, but definitely most people.
okay. Gotcha. That was a question I was going to ask you. Like, how easy is it getting around not knowing like basic Cambodian?
Yeah, I mean, I have learned a little bit of Khmer. I took some language classes, and then my wife teaches me a few new words here and there.
Yep.
Um, it's like in that Asian language family, so it's kind of hard, say like like English, Spanish, French, like none of those are gonna really help you learning Khmer. Although like they do have some loan words from English, like the word for computer is computer,
Yeah.
so some of the words are just English words said in their accent. But the grammar is like really simple because like you don't conjugate verbs. Like you'd say, today I walk to the store, yesterday I walk to the store, tomorrow I walk to the store. You don't like have to figure out all the different forms that
Yep.
verbs have. And all of like the words are like really short, like one or two syllables.
Ah,
So
that's easier.
if there is like a big word, it's because it's like a compound word. Like they took two or three words and strung them together to make a new word.
Mm,
So, and even like just the fact that they're compound words makes it easier to learn new words as well, because you go, oh, this word is just these two words together.
mm,
um so yeah, and then it's also not a tonal language. I know like Thai,
mm.
and then I think
Vietnamese,
also the Chinese dialects I
Chinese.
think are tonal, but
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Hard.
here we don't have any tones. So like the vocabulary, it's obviously mostly different from the Western languages, but the grammar is easy. It's not tonal. So, yeah, I mean, you're never going to be able to speak it like a native, but you can definitely pick up some words here and there.
Awesome. I can see why you picked Cambodia. Like low cost of living, it's
Hmm.
not fast paced. People are relatively friendly. You can find people who can speak English, and the dating market's quite good. What's your favorite part about being in Cambodia?
I mean, the people are very friendly, like Southeast Asia. Like I know Thailand is called like the land of smiles.
Yeah.
Cambodia is, mostly the same. So like the people are all very, nice and respectful. I also really like the food. Like I mentioned, I do like Asian cuisine,
Hmm.
but coming from America, like a lot of the food that we have is sort of
Mm.
Americanized versions of other food.
Yeah.
Even something like this might surprise people, but I even find like Italian food to be better in Siam Reap than it
Really?
is in America on average. Yeah, because like the difference is like in America, like someone opens an Italian restaurant and they're like, yeah, sure, I can make some pasta and pizza. Like, why not? How hard can it be? I've been to Olive Garden.
Yep.
Whereas like if you go to an Italian restaurant in Cambodia, it's run by a person that was born in Italy. So, like, they're not trying to make like an Americanized version of every dish. They're just making the dishes as they exist in Italy.
Yep.
So,
Yeah. Like you, I love food, and so a big part of travel is food. Um, Last question. Do you have any tips for anyone that's looking to travel to Cambodia?
um, I don't know. I mean, if you're just like coming to have a good time, I would say, just do the things the other tourists do, go to Angkor Wat. Um, you can go on, the Tonle Sap River, get like a floating village tour. If you're coming long term, I would
Yeah.
say, because I even had my parents visit me. This was before I met my wife, but they mostly enjoyed it, but sometimes they would like be disappointed because like, oh, this specific thing like isn't as good as it is in America.
Mm,
And so yeah, I just feel that like if you're coming here to stay long term, like you just kind of have to accept that like it's not just going to be exactly like America, but cheaper. Like,
yeah.
okay, it would be nice if it was maybe, but like it's not. Like some things are going to be different, and that's okay. People will be nice and understanding. But again, you're not gonna like have a lot of e-commerce companies like delivering things to your door. There might be some specific thing that you want that you're not really able to find. Like, if you want like a real milkshake, for example, there's not a lot of places that have that. So
Yes.
yeah, like if you're just the kind of person where like, oh, everything has to be like absolutely perfect,
Mm,
then you're probably not going to want to live here. But again, if you just kind of want like a simple life, like if experiences and people make you happy like more than consumption, then I think you'll enjoy it. But if you're like more of the consumerist type, then I think there are probably better options for you.
gotcha. Are you using Cambodia as a base to travel to other places or sorry, are you using Siam Reap as a base to travel around Cambodia?
Well, I mean, I definitely want to visit other places in Cambodia. I've already been to Phnom Penh a couple of times.
Yep.
I've been to Kawrong, which is one of the most beautiful islands I've ever seen. I'd like to go to more places. I'd like to go to Kampot, um, maybe Battambang.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, I'll go to some of those places when I have the chance. I'm not like one of these people who's like traveling around constantly. I mostly just kind of hang out with my wife here. Go out, see movies with her. Work on my YouTube channel, that sort of thing.
Gotcha.
But yeah, I would love to travel and visit lots of other places, whether it be in the region or elsewhere. But I got another 60 years to do that.
You got plenty of time. Um,
Yeah.
Thanks, Alan. Really appreciate your time today.
Mhm.
I'm incredibly impressed. The fact that you fired by 31, you're living the dream. You've been doing it for
Yeah.
2 years. You found it like an amazing lifestyle that you've settled down in Cambodia, and I wish you all the best, mate.
All right. Thank you for the interview.
Cheers, mate.